Hi everyone, and welcome to the video of the blog, which is all about perimenopause and menopause. So I wanted to talk about the difference between perimenopause, menopause, and even postmenopause, because it's a question that comes up a lot. How do I know if I'm menopausal? So I wanted to address this. I've done a blog on it, and now I'm going to talk about the blog for those of you that haven't read or don't want to read the blog. I'm going to talk to you about it instead. So in summary, before I start talking in a bit more detail, perimenopause is the transition period that goes before menopause, and menopause technically is when you haven't had a period for 12 months continuously. So they're basically the definitions. So let's talk about perimenopause first. So every month during a woman's normal cycle, we have two hormones. There's actually lots of other hormones, but they're the main hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And they're involved in a process called ovulation. And ovulation is really when an egg is released from our ovaries. So estrogen has to reach a certain peak for an egg to be released from an ovary. That's ovulation. When the egg is released, a little crater is formed in the ovary, and it's this crater that produces the hormone progesterone. And both estrogen and progesterone basically prepare the uterus, the uterine lining, to accept and nourish a fertilized egg. And when an egg isn't fertilized, then that uterus sheds its lining, which is when we bleed. So that contraction, sometimes you feel a bit uncomfortable. It's because the uterus is contracting in order to, or the uterine lining is contracting in order to shed that extra layer of blood. Like new blood vessels are created in order to provide nutrients to the egg, which is the embryo and the fetus. So that's what our blood is. It's kind of the remnants of an unfertilized egg and also that uterine lining. Now, during perimenopause, that cycle's disrupted. So it means that our egg reserve is starting to decline. It used to be that they thought that we just didn't have any more eggs. That's now being disputed, that maybe we do have eggs, but for whatever reason they're not released anymore. But basically our egg reserve declines over our lifetime. When we're born, we have so many eggs, and they're released every month, and then that reduces even more quickly as we edge closer and closer to menopause. And when we actually hit menopause, it means that those eggs are no longer being released. So during this perimenopausal time, estrogen really fluctuates. It's up and down like a roller coaster, and progesterone usually steadily declines, which means we can end up with shorter cycles. So if you're someone that usually has a 30-day cycle, you might find that sometimes you have a 26-day cycle, sometimes you've got a 31-day cycle, and it's up and down all the time. You might find you bleed more heavily, and that's usually because you might have lots of estrogen but not enough progesterone, or a little, too much progesterone, enough estrogen is usually the reason why you bleed heavily. Both of them can affect bleeding. Sometimes you might have very little bleeding. Sometimes you might find that one period you bleed for 6 days, and one period you bleed for 2 days, and it's kind of really all over the place. You might start to get hot flushes, you might get cold flushes, you might get night sweats, you might have mood swings, you might find that you get a bit of vaginal dryness, or you start to get more thrush or vaginal infections like bacterial vaginosis. You might find that you put on a bit more weight, or you get a bit more water retention. So there's so many symptoms, and lots of people react differently to this period of their life as well. So you could say that if you have a symptom that you've never had before and you're in your 40s, the chances are it's probably linked to that hormone imbalance, but we don't know. We don't know. There's no wrong and right, and everybody's individual. So when estrogen is really high in relation to progesterone, then we can feel really terrible. So there's a kind of ratio, there's a balance between estrogen and progesterone. And when they're both kind of going down, but if during that down period you've got a time where estrogen is really high in relation to progesterone, that's when you can feel really yuck. So there's also another hormone called testosterone, which is also produced in our ovaries. It is the male hormone, but we produce it just like men produce estrogen. And we make it small amounts, and that also fluctuates, and that can also make us feel terrible. So testosterone really gives us our oomph, our drive, and if it's too high, then we can start to get hair on our face, on our moustache and our chin. We might start to get more acne because testosterone drives oil production in our face. We might feel more aggressive than normal. If it's too low, then we can have low libido, we can have really low motivation, and we can kind of have mood issues as well and feel really flat. So the list of symptoms is endless. So it's usually a time when you might feel a bit lost, when you're really not losing your marbles, you're not alone, but maybe you're kind of emotionally trying to find your place in the world as well. Things are going on at this time. Kids are leaving home. It might be that you're separating. It might be you're looking after sick relatives, or parents are dying. So it's a hugely tumultuous emotional time for us when we're in our 40s and 50s, and then we've got all of this hormonal shit going on too. So it can be really, really stressful, and stress plays a massive role in those symptoms. But you're not alone. So 80% of women can experience some form of symptom during this time, and of those 80%, 20% will experience severe symptoms that affect their quality of life. The vast majority of us really only experience mild symptoms, and actually there's 20% of people that don't have any symptoms at all. So it's totally possible to go through this perimenopause, menopause transition and have no symptoms. 20% of people have no symptoms. It's definitely possible. And we know that our diet and our lifestyle play a huge role in those symptoms. Things like insulin, alcohol, stress, they all play a massive, massive role. Smoking cigarettes will definitely increase some of those symptoms, particularly hot flushes. So eating well, moving well, sleeping well, having a really healthy digestive system, making sure our detoxification organs, our liver, our kidneys, our skin, our gut, our lungs, they're all working really well, really, really important as well. Taking care that we reduce our exposure to certain chemicals that can actually imbalance our hormones too. Managing stress is key to a smooth journey during this transition. So menopause is basically the end of that transition period. So sometimes perimenopause can go on for 10 years, but menopause is basically when eggs are no longer released. Estrogen is so low that ovulation cannot take place, and that means that you don't have enough progesterone either. So you don't have periods for 12 months continuously in order to be technically menopausal. If you have had no periods for 5 months and then you bleed, that's perimenopausal. You kind of go back to the snakes and ladders board and start all over again. So menopause can occur basically between 40 and 55 years old, roughly. But there are other factors that might mean that you have menopause a bit earlier. So surgery, medication, radiotherapy, and there are certain conditions where the ovaries might not be functioning properly, which means that you go into early menopause, which is really before 40. Usually it's before 35. And then we kick into post-menopause. So technically post-menopause is 12 months and 1 day with no periods. And this basically continues until the end of our life. So during this period, those lovely symptoms like hot flushes usually reduce over time and eventually should disappear if you've had any. Sometimes if hormones are still imbalanced, then you can still experience those nice symptoms that you get in perimenopause. Eventually the body kind of finds its new normal. So the transition should happen, and then the body kind of reaches its balance, and then you carry on and you're fine. So it's really that body trying to find its new balance that can cause some problems with us. And usually if you are having symptoms of perimenopause, even though you're post-menopause, it means we really need to have a look at what's going on in your lifestyle, diet, your habits, exercise, to see if we can actually help balance those hormones. So estrogen and testosterone, they're actually made in other parts of the body, and estrogen is really, really important for our mental health, our heart health, and our bone health. So it's got lots and lots of other different roles. So it's always being produced in other tissues. It's not being produced in our ovaries anymore because we're not going to have babies. When estrogen is really low, then we become at risk of high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, that's heart disease, and osteoporosis as well, because it's really important for bone health. So we need to make sure that estrogen is still being made in other parts of our body. Stress can actually stop that happening, because cortisol, our stress hormone, is always made in priority to estrogen. So we have to make sure that we balance our stress. So this is when herbs, when nutrition, when lifestyle changes, including sensible exercising, strength training, exercising for our age is really important to keep us healthy, strong, and symptom free. So if you want to know more, come and join our Facebook group, Hormone Health Tips for Women 40 Plus. If you want to know a little bit more about getting your mojo back during perimenopause, we have a free webinar on our website. So please go to our website and go and watch the free webinar. And if you're interested, we have our 12-week program. It could take longer. It's completely online. It's completely flexible. You work at your own pace, and we're here to help and answer questions and give you support. And it's only $199. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. Give us a call. Come to hormoneempowerment.com, or come and join us on our Facebook group, Hormone Empowerment, and PM us, DM us. We're on Instagram as well, or come and email us at ask@hormoneempowerment.com, and we can answer any questions you have. So hopefully you've learned a little bit more, and you'll know where you are in this journey. Doesn't have to be a terrible journey. It can be a really cool time to reevaluate your life, to get your health in check. It's a really good window of opportunity to make sure that the next 30 years of your life, you are as healthy and as strong and as happy as you have ever been. So take care, and I will see you in our Facebook group.